Morning, Natalie.
Good morning, Kartik. How are you?
I'm doing good. Let's wait for the other panelists to join as well and then briefly start the session.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Perfect. Hi, Ramon.
Evening, Kartik. How are you? Good to see you.
Likewise, man.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. Very good.
I'll try something here. Does that work? Let's see.
It does. Yeah,
You can see the background there?
I can.
Excellent. Let's do that so that don't see my messy office.
A very good evening, Ms. Geeta.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Jagannathan.
Hi.
Very good evening. A very good evening.
Very good evening to all of you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we're just waiting for the other people to join.
Okay.
And just in a brief short time, we'll start the session.
All right.
Perfect. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you.
Evening, Mridul.
Good evening.
Very good evening, everyone. I'm Kartik Narayan, the Executive Director for International Alliances at the Confederation of Educational Institutions of India. And I formally welcome you to this session by CEII and Rochdale Academy. I take this opportunity to welcome the people who have taken the effort to join us in today's session. First and foremost, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists today. Our first guest, she has always been devoted towards the development of specialized high school programs, such as STEM entrepreneurship, creative industry media arts, and English enhancement learning. She recognizes the immense importance of the transformative approach to learning for all overall student development. Let me welcome the Director of Academics at Rochdale, Ms. Natalie Radina. A warm welcome to you. We also have Mr. Raylon Nazareth. He's the Senior Manager for Global Education Partnerships at Rochdale Academy. Welcome, Raylon. Our third guest, she has a passion for knowledge and a desire to actively evolve. She has always believed that one size does not fit all. She strongly believes that every child is unique, and for that, she has dedicated her life to create an environment where students receive personalized learning. This school is the result of her hard work and desire for an inclusive and supportive atmosphere. A heartfelt welcome to Ms. Geeta Jagannathan, the founder and managing director of APL Global School, Chennai. Now, moving on to the next one. She has always believed that she was born to be a teacher. Having over 30 years of teaching experience in the field of special education and mainstream education in various curriculums, what makes her special is her strong belief that you cannot limit education to just classroom and textbooks, and that learning is a continuous process and you need to constantly evolve with this fast-paced world. And that is what she exactly teaches her students, and you can see with their success. A very warm welcome, Ms. Sonia Mehta, School Director, Pathways World School, Aravali. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. We also have with us Dr. Sandeep Ananthanarayanan. He's going to be joining us in a short while. He's a Group CEO of STS Group Bangladesh, the largest private sector conglomerate in Bangladesh, operating all the DPS schools and various international schools. Ms. Mridu Singh Jhala, she's the Executive Director and Member Designate to the Governing Board at CII. Good evening, Mridu. I also thank all the esteemed teachers and students from APL Global School, Chennai, Pathways World School, Aravali, Pathways School, Gurgaon, Modern School, Vasant Vihar, Delhi, Alcon Public School, Delhi. A very special thanks to Maharani Gayatri Devi Girls School, Jaipur, Scottish High International School, Gurugram. Thank you so much for registering and being a part of this session today and making it special. Let me quickly run you through the agenda. Today's session will comprise the following segments. Firstly, there's going to be a brief introduction of CEII by Dr. Sandeep. Then Mr. Raylon will give a brief background and introduction of Rochdale and Ms. Natalie. Ms. Natalie will take over the session from there and move ahead. Post the session, we shall have a short question and answer session moderated by Dr. Sandeep, following which there'll be a short panel discussion. Then we'll have a final closing vote of thanks, and then we conclude. Just a little housekeeping for our esteemed attendees before we get started. Today's session is titled Level Up, Achieve Your Full Potential in Schools. If you have any questions during the presentations, please feel free to type them into the question and answer box in your control panel. We'll try and bring up as many questions in the end as we can. I shall be muting the room to keep the quality of the sound functional during the session. A few polls have been taken during the session, and you'll be asked to select the answer and submit it. Once everyone has submitted the responses, I will publish the results for everyone to observe. Now that Dr. Sandeep is not there right now, Raylon, can we hand over the podium to you?
Sure, that sounds great. Kartik, thanks very much for the kind introduction and welcome from CEII. It's a pleasure to be here, as well as to our esteemed panelists that are joining us today. And also hello to all the young people online. Wish we could see your faces, but there's so many of you. So we're very excited to be doing this wonderful workshop with you. It takes me back to when I was a high school student. And there was a lot of things going on in my mind when I had reached those final grades of high school in terms of planning my future. So very excited to be doing this workshop with you. A little bit about myself. Prior to joining Rochdale, I used to work in admissions and recruitment at the University of Waterloo. It's one of Canada's top universities and well known around the world. And believe me, as a former employee of Waterloo and even a student at one point, I know how challenging it is to go to places such as your dream institution, and the pressure that they may put on. And a lot of that is really things that we think about more than we need to. And what we really need to be looking at is what we're doing day to day as a student. So very excited to be part of this workshop with you all. I'm going to provide a very brief introduction to Rochdale Academy, and as well as introduce Mrs. Rudner to you all. And she's going to take over the workshop. If I could just ask, perfect. Great, thank you. So I'm sure everyone can see the screen right now. It should be very clear for you. And let's go ahead and start. So a little bit about us at Rochdale Academy. What is Rochdale Academy and why are we here today? Well, we are based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We are an Ontario Ministry of Education inspected private secondary school. That is our board, for lack of a better term, much like the CBSE or the IB or Cambridge. Ours is the Ontario Ministry of Education. However, if you look for a program in Rochdale, you won't find it in Canada. You'll find it around the world. Private secondary school. That is our. You'll see here that in this wonderful map that there's over 51 partner schools worldwide that we work with, and more than 6,500 students and over 55,000 enrollments. So we have a very large community of students around the world that are enrolled in our programs, enrolled in our curriculum, and schools that take advantage of our resources so that students can access a great quality curriculum no matter where they are. And we specialize in two things at Rochdale. We specialize in the secondary and foundation academic program side of things in terms of curriculum, but also the use of 21st century e-learning education technology. That's a big part of what we do. And we've been doing it since 2014. And I want you all to look at the situation we're in now, where we're meeting online in Zoom, and reflect on what the past couple of years have been like for yourselves as students. And that was something that we all experienced. And the education technology piece is a big piece of what we do, bringing things that children, students like into the classroom and allowing them to achieve their full potential. So that's a little bit about us at Rochdale Academy to give you some context. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our speaker, Mrs. Rudner, who's going to be coming online and providing a wonderful session. Mrs. Rudner is our Director of Academics at Rochdale. She leads our global high school program in the areas of curriculum development, teacher training, co-curricular projects, and ensuring a distinction in teaching, learning, and continuous advancement across all of our partner schools that you see here on the map. Prior to joining Rochdale, Mrs. Rudner was the president of the Board of Directors of Science Teachers Association of Ontario and co-chair for its annual conference of science educators across Ontario. She's also organized diverse events to engage Canadian educators in STEM across Ontario for professional learning and community building. Mrs. Rudner is also on the Education Advisory Panel for Let's Talk Science, a leading organization that prepares Canadian youth for careers in STEM. In addition to teaching within the York Region District School Board, one of the largest school boards in Ontario, she was the Assistant Department Head of Science and a curriculum consultant, contributing to the capacity building of educators and system leaders with her expertise in K-12 science curriculum, assessment, differentiated instruction, instructional leadership, inquiry-based learning, critical thinking, design thinking, and growth mindset. Last but not least, sorry to put all the accolades on you, Mrs. Rudner, but I think it's important to identify. I should also mention that Mrs. Rudner was the 2009 recipient of the prestigious Canadian Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence in STEM, one of the nation's highest academic awards for Canadian educators. So very excited to be in the session with you all, and excited to pass it on to Mrs. Rudner to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Raylan. So good morning from Canada and good evening for you. As Raylan said, we're coming to you from Toronto, which is the capital of Ontario. It is not the capital of Canada, that's actually Ottawa, but we are the largest city in Canada. So that's where we are talking to you from this morning. So I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you about leveling up and achieving your full potential in school. And so we're going to take the next half hour, 40 minutes or so, and go through some strategies that we use with our students at Rochdale, as well as strategies that I've used with my students in school over the last 20 years that help our students be very, very successful. So as mentioned, if you do have questions along the way that you would like answered at the Q&A at the end, please make sure that you type them into the Q&A. And when we go through, we're going to be doing a couple of polls and we'll be giving you the instructions. So we're going to ask that you respond as quickly as you can because there's a lot of you online so that we can keep moving with the presentation. So when we talk about being successful in school, that's something that we all want to do, and we all want to make sure that we can be our best selves in school. We know that school is difficult. For some, it's more difficult than others, but we know that everybody can be successful given the right tools, given the right attitude, given the right amount of work. So we're going to talk about some very simple things today that you can do to make sure that you will do and be the best person that you can be in school and the most successful that you can be. So today we're going to start with some learning goals about what we're going to actually be learning. So the first one is that we're going to talk a little bit about our learning styles, and hopefully you'll be able to identify your learning style and know how it's going to be able to help you be the best student that you can be. You can choose learning strategies that are going to work best for you in the classroom and at home while you're studying. You're going to understand a little bit more about how your memory works and some strategies that are going to help you improve your memory so that when it comes to those tests and it comes to those moments where you need to be able to remember important information, you have some things up your sleeve that you can use to do that. And last but not least, you can identify what steps you need to take in order to be most effective in your studying. So that's what we're going to take a look at today, and we're going to get started right away. And the first place that I would like to begin is with something called mindset. When we think of ourselves as a student, and I want you all to think of yourselves as a student, we think of things that we do well, and we think of things that we don't do very well. And we often hear students say, oh, I can't do that. I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at this. So what we want you to do is when you're thinking about studying, we want you to really come into the studying and preparation with what we call a growth mindset. A growth mindset really is about understanding that you're going to be able to do the things that you want to do, but it's going to take time, but that you can learn to do them, you can develop the skills to be better at it, and it's just going to take a little bit of effort on your part. A lot of us fall into a fixed mindset where we think, I'm not good at this, it's too hard, I can't do that. When we have a fixed mindset, what we actually do is we make it extremely difficult for ourselves to be able to learn, because what we're doing is we're basically saying, I'm not really interested in learning. So what we want everybody to do right now is I want you to think about having that growth mindset, because if you have that growth mindset, you're going to be far more successful in everything that you attempt and everything that you do. And one of the things that you can do is think about the next time you catch yourself saying something like, I just can't do it. So if you just can't do it, that's not really true, because what it means is that you can't do it yet. So in this moment, at this moment in time, you don't have the skills or you don't have the knowledge to be able to do it. We would say to you, and I would say to you, is that with work, with effort, and knowing some right strategies, you will be able to do it. It just might take you a little bit longer. And so I always like to tell my students that if you think you can't do it, you can't do it yet. And then you're going to be able to, and we're going to work together to be able to help you get there so that you can eventually do it. So as we go through today's presentation, I really want you to think about, how do you view yourself as a student? And do you view yourself as a student who is stuck in a particular place? And if so, I want you to start thinking about all of these things on the right-hand side of the screen, which is talking about what kinds of things can you do to make yourself a better student and to improve? Because we know that in all our skills, we can get better with practice, with hard work, and with the right attitude. So we're going to go into this presentation today with a growth mindset. And that is going to help us hugely when it comes to being successful in school. So quickly, how do we learn? Well, typically, we learn about a concept in class. So we sit in class, the teacher teaches something and we learn about it. But that's not good enough for us to be able to have it in our head and for us to remember it. We need to be able to practice it. So once we learn about a concept, we're going to have to go into a practice mode. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can do some of that practice to be able to get us to the point where we really understand it. Once we practice, we're going to be able to organize it and organize our thinking, because that's where we start to make the really big connections. And that's where we start to make really good understanding of what it is that we're working. And finally, we're going to be able to connect our learning. And ultimately, that's where we want to end up in life. We want to end up being able to use the things we learn in class in our real world. Now, some of it obviously is a little bit specific to the discipline you're studying, but there are lots of skills that we learn, and we want to be able to make that meaningful for us. And once we've made it meaningful for us, then it really is going to stick with us for life. So that's what we're going to just talk a little bit about today. We're going to give you some strategies to go from that learning to that practicing and the organizing piece. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's going to help you make some of those connections. So we're going to start with our first poll, and I'm going to ask that it be posted in just a second. So we're going to ask you, what is your superpower? Every single person learns in a different way. You and I don't learn the same way. We have unique strengths. We have unique interests. We approach things in very different ways. We remember things in very different ways. And typically, when we think of learning, sometimes we tend to forget that. And we forget that the way that something is being taught is maybe not the best way for each of us. But that doesn't mean that we can't deal with it and we don't have strategies. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how do we learn the best and what kinds of strategies can you use to help you learn. Now, there's lots of different ways that we talk about our learning preferences and our learning styles. We're going to talk about one of the most common ways, which is that people often identify themselves as a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner. So what does that mean? Well, if you're a visual learner, you like being able to see. You learn through seeing it. You have to see the notes on the board. You have to draw it out in a diagram. You remember things by visualizing it in your head and coming up with a picture. You like to see the written instructions in front of you. So if that's the case, we would classify you as a visual learner or a predominantly visual learner. Or maybe you're somebody who likes to close their eyes and just listen to the teacher talk. You like to hear the instructions. Reading them on a piece of paper doesn't make much sense to you. So you might be a person who likes to talk and listen, and that's how you learn best. That would mean that you are an auditory learner. Or there's some of us, and there's a lot of us, who like to learn by doing. We can't sit still. We make gestures when speaking, and I'm having a really hard time talking today because I'm trying to hold my mouse and not move. But I like to walk around. I like to move. I like to go for a walk and think about things. And if that's how you learn, we call you a kinesthetic learner. You need to actually do something physical. You might need to dance. You might need to sing. You might need to bounce a ball. You might need to fidget with something. And that's how you focus and pay attention. And so I like to think of these as being your superpowers. And we all have a little bit of all of them in all of us, but there's often one that we prefer. So what I'd like you to do now is in the poll, I want you to think about which superpower best describes you. It's not going to be the only superpower, but I want you to think about what is your main superpower. Do you like making notes and charts and diagrams and remembering things with pictures? Do you prefer to listen to your instructions? Or do you like to actively do things and move things around and, move? So if we could please get the poll up, we're going to ask you to please answer. And when we have everybody answered, we can share or at least the majority, we can share those results. So hopefully everybody's been able to answer that poll. And I am very interested to see how you have identified your superpower. Are we able to share the results of the poll?
We are still
we're still collecting?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, everybody, you've got another 20 seconds to get your results in on that poll. Okay, so excellent. So we can see that over half of you are visual learners, and that's very, very common. A lot of us really like to be able to see the instructions, see the pictures. And that's something that's really important for us as teachers to know, because often teachers will get up in front of the class and they will talk and they'll forget that some of us are visual learners and need to see it. Okay, or we've got 20% or 21% are auditory learners, and the rest of you were kinesthetic learners. Okay, so we can see that among everybody that answered, there are a lot of different responses and a lot of people that have different learning styles. So when we think about learning, we need to recognize that our students learn in different ways and that it's okay to learn in different ways, but we need to come up with some strategies that are going to work for each of us. So when you're studying for your exams and your tests and things like that, you also need to recognize that there are going to be some strategies that work better or that work more easily for you. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do all of these things. So we're going to give some strategies, and we're going to talk about things that everybody can do, but they might appeal to you more than other things because of your learning style. Now, remember I said I wanted you to pick your main superpower, but that doesn't mean that it's the only superpower. So some people really like to make notes and charts and diagrams, but it really does help if they can listen. And in certain situations, they like to learn by talking and listening. Or sometimes they like to be able to go out for a walk and think about things in their head and go over things and move things around and visualize things by moving. So just because you are one primarily doesn't mean you don't have a little bit of everything else. Okay, and some people, so that's just something to keep in mind. So all of these strategies that we're going to talk about could work for everybody. Okay, there we go. So we're going to start by looking a little bit more and understanding what it means to be the different types of learners. So the first one we're going to look at are the visual learners. Those are people who learn primarily by seeing, or those who enjoy learning by seeing, or they find it easiest to learn in that way. So there's some things that you need to make sure that you're doing if you are somebody who learns by seeing. And we always tell you this in class, but you should be taking notes. You should be writing down what you hear, because if you just hear it, you're probably going to forget it. So when it comes to studying, you're not going to remember it. So you're going to want to make sure that you would do a good job copying your notes from the board. But the part about the studying that you want to focus on is that things that work for visual learners is that they want to reread those notes, look at them over again, rewrite them if necessary, organize them. Something else that really works for visual learners is they like to mark up their notes. So they like to get out their highlighters. And I've got students who make beautiful, beautiful notes, and they're color coded based on the main ideas. So main ideas might be in yellow, supporting ideas might be in green, or they might choose the color pink, and everything that's related to a particular topic is in pink, or they highlight their keywords in blue. So color coding to a system that works for you is really helpful because it's very visual, and so you recognize you can help use it to identify relations and connections between different ideas on the page. And then also highlighting important ideas. So marking up your notes, writing little notes to yourself on the side of your paper as you're studying are sometimes very, very helpful because it helps you remember and you can see what it is that you want to remember. And just getting organized. And you'll see that being organized is something that all learners really need to do. It doesn't matter if you are a visual learner, a kinesthetic learner, but it's how you're going to organize it that might be helpful. So for somebody who's visual, having diagrams, flowcharts, having outlines, maps, concept maps, which we're going to talk a little bit about later, those are all going to really help you keep yourself organized as a visual learner. So those are just some quick little ideas. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at one type of note-taking idea that is actually very helpful for visual learners and really helpful for studying. So this note-taking method is called the Cornell Method, and it works really, really well for students. I teach science, and I really like it because it serves two purposes. So basically, the way you set it up, if you look on the right here, is you're going to draw like a T-chart. And then you're going to leave a space at the bottom for a summary. So you're going to have a left column, which isn't very big. It's big enough to write in, and a right column, which is much more bigger. You're going to take your notes in class on the right side of that column. So that's where you're going to put all your details. Everything the teacher says, everything you want to write down is going to go on that right side of the page. Or if you're working as a review sheet, you're going to be working with your lesson notes, and you might be writing down all of the key things because remember, we said as a visual learner, rewriting your notes is sometimes really helpful. So you're going to be rewriting your notes on this right side in this right column. But that's not all you're going to do with it, because when we know that we're learning, we need to be able to make those connections and get organized, remember? Because that's where we want to end up. We want to be able to connect to the things that we learn. So now, if I have to go and study and I have to read my detailed notes every single time, I'm never, ever going to get through everything. And some of these things are things that I learned and I remember really quickly, and I don't have to worry about spending lots of time going over. But there's some things that just don't stick. So what I'm going to do is on the right side, I'm going to either write down some questions that sort of are answered by the specific notes. So what is the possible question that might be asked? So here I've got notes on the digestive system. So my question might be, what is the purpose of it? Because when I'm studying, I want to be able to answer, what is the purpose of it? I might put down a key word, like bolus here. What is a bolus? And so I'm going to highlight on the right side the key things. What's really nice about this is that when I then go back to study before the test, is if I cover up this right side where I've got all my detailed notes, and I use these as my questions and prompts, I can actually quiz myself, and I can ask myself if I actually know what the purpose is. And if I don't know, I can check my answer, or if I do know, I can check my answer and make sure that I'm correct. So this serves not only as a note-taking exercise and organizing your thoughts, it allows you to make connections, and it also allows you to check your understanding as you get ready for that test that's coming up. So this is a really neat method of taking notes. And then at the bottom, you would want to put a summary of the key ideas, because there's always some really key ideas that you should know once you've studied a lesson. I like to think about it. If you can't tell me why you're learning what you're learning, then it's not really making much sense to you. So one of the things you really need to make sure that you do know is, why are you learning this? Why is it important? Because if you have a reason for why you need to know this, then it's going to stick in your head, because things that we think are important or that we know are important and we've connected to are the things that we remember the best. Okay, so let's move on to talking to our auditory learners. So you are the people who like to listen. You don't like quiet. You like to talk out your answers. You like to work with a partner and ask each other questions. You're the ones who like to participate in class discussions a lot. You like to listen with your eyes closed. Maybe you like to repeat facts with your eyes closed. Maybe you like to read the question out loud because you need to hear it in order to be able to understand it. You like to listen to videos, listen to audio recordings. Maybe you like to record yourself reading your notes so that you can listen back to it because that's how it sticks better to you. So these are all things that you can do if you are an auditory learner. The one that we're going to talk about today is using word association. So auditory learners, one strategy is using something called a mnemonic device, or a silly sentence or a song, or sometimes even just listening to sort of classical music with no lyrics in the background to have that association with sounds and music and actual words. So all of these are going to help you if you are an auditory learner or you like to hear or repeat things. So we're going to talk about mnemonic devices. So mnemonic devices are a variety of different things, and there's a variety of them up on the board here that you might or may not have seen in school. So the first one is, I teach biology I used to teach biology. And so one of the things that we ask our students to remember is the order of classification. And so we expect them to know that it's kingdom, phylum, class, order, class, order, family, genus, species in that particular order. And if you try to remember it in that particular order, it gets very, very difficult. So one of the things that I teach my students is to come up with a mnemonic or a silly sentence where each word starts with the first letter of the level of the taxon so that we can actually remember what order they are in. So my sentence that I learned when I was in high school some 30 plus years ago was King Philip called out for Greek salad. Why King Philip liked Greek salad, I don't know, but I do know that it helps me organize and know the order of the levels of organization and classification. And so I'll often have my students come up with their own sentence that means something for them. And this just allows you a quick way to remember something where you maybe need to remember an order of something. Another one is using sort of an acrostic. So for example, in this particular case, the order of operations in math. So in Canada, we teach it this way: brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction, or we refer to it as BEDMAS. So BEDMAS would be the acrostic that we remember when we're going to do order of operations. And that's how we remember that the brackets come first, then you do the exponents, then it's division and multiplication, and then you do addition and subtraction. So it tells us the order by which we would want to approach a math problem. Down here, colors of the rainbow, we often know as Mr. Roy G. Biv: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So you can come up with a silly acronym or a silly name representing something. And then the last strategy too is sometimes you have to remember a very long number or something like that, and we call that chunking. So you break it into little manageable pieces, and we do this all the time with telephone numbers and with credit card numbers and all those things. And that actually is what we call, it's a type of mnemonic device. So this long number, you would break it up into little chunks of 3 or 4 numbers. So 416, 123, 1212. And so it makes it much easier to remember because our brain is able to remember small chunks of information, but remembering this very, very long 10-digit number, it would really struggle with. So when you are studying, coming up with a silly sentence, coming up with letters that represent something, that is one way of remembering all of those things that you have to keep in order, keep in mind as you're going through. So moving on. So learning by doing and learning by, so that would be your kinesthetic learner, okay? These, as I said, are people that like to move and be active when they're learning. So highly, highly recommend that if you're studying, don't fight it. If you need to get up and move around, get up and move around. Stand up at your desk and study. Walk around your room every few minutes. Go for a walk if you're listening to a recording or something. Don't just sit still because that's not going to help you. If you need to move, get up and move. Now, obviously, you can't move to the point where you're not doing anything. If you're going out and playing a full game of basketball, you're probably not going to be learning, but you might be going over things in your head. So it is good to take a break and get up and move. And that goes for everybody, especially this year, staying in our desks and being in front of the screen all day. A little bit of exercise is not going to, and we're going to talk about why that's good in a second. Create flowcharts or mind maps. Now, this might seem counterintuitive for somebody who likes to learn by doing, but people who like to learn by doing like to organize and move things around. And so you can actually organize your notes either on little cards, bits of paper, sticky notes. And so sometimes that is really helpful because you can move them and you can say, okay, well, this goes over here and you can move it over here. So that's something that's very, very helpful. And then the other thing is that if you're listening to something, keeping yourself busy, rewriting your notes, tracing diagrams, and sometimes if you're quizzing yourself, even just something like bouncing a ball or playing with a little fidget toy of some sort will help you keep focused on your learning. So kinesthetic learners, learning by doing is something that's also really important to keep in mind. So here's an example of what we call a mind and concept map. This works for everybody. It appeals to the visual learner as well because you can do some color coding, you can do some organizing, but you can also do this by using sticky notes and moving it around. I have students where they show me pictures of their bedroom wall and they have sticky notes or little pieces of paper taped to the bedroom wall, and they stand in front of their wall and they move pieces of paper around with their study notes to try and organize their ideas. And those students are my kinesthetic learners, and it works really well for them. For the visual learners, you can do it on the computer, you can do it in your notebook. So a mind or concept map is a way of making those connections, organizing your thoughts and making those connections so that you understand what you need to do. So you start off with your main idea in the middle, and then you might go off and branch off to your topic 1, and you would have a topic here. And then you might provide some examples. If it's a math concept or something in science where there's a calculation, you might provide a sample calculation so that you can see how to do it. So as you branch off, you start very big, and you go into the first topic, and then you start putting in all the details that you remember about that second topic connected back. If you want, you can connect it with little words. So for example, if I was talking about the digestive system, my main idea would be the digestive system, and it includes, and I would say maybe the stomach. And then I would have something from the stomach. I would talk about its structure. It's a muscular structure. It contains acid. It breaks down these chemicals, and I would kind of give the whole, all of the things that the stomach does here. So it would be nice and organized on my page. And then over here, I might go down and say, topic 2 might be the small intestine. What is the structure of the small intestine? What is its function? How does it work? And so I would do that for all of the components of the digestive system, and I would have a nice visual diagram where I could shift things around. I can draw arrows between things that are connected, and I can really make myself a nice visual map of what I'm going to do. So there's lots of tools for mind and concept mapping. If you just look on the internet, you'll be able to find there's lots of free tools, or you can just use simple pen and paper, draw a bubble in the middle, put the name idea, and then draw arrows, and then keep expanding. Or you can use little bits of paper, flashcards, and just organize those on your desk, and that works just as well too. So we're going to come up with our next thing. So we've given you a few specific strategies to try. Making notes using the Cornell method, a mind map, a mnemonic or a memory trick to remember something, color coding, recording yourself reading. So I'm just curious, this is not an exhaustive list, but I want you to think and set a goal, because one of the things that we know about studying and learning is that when you set a goal and you commit to something, you actually get it done, or you're more likely to get it done, whereas if you ignore it. So we're going to ask you in the next week, I want you to try one of these things. So which thing are you going to try as you prepare and study for your courses? Are you going to make notes using the Cornell method? Are you going to draw a mind or concept map? Are you going to create a mnemonic to remember something? Are you going to color code your notes? Or are you going to record yourself reading your notes or watching a video? So take a few minutes and figure out what you're going to try.
Natalie, so there are just 3 questions right now, if you can answer it live.
Okay, absolutely. I can do that while we're doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see the first one.
Yeah.
So the first question is how to avoid distractions. Well, that is really difficult because we know that it's very easy. So First of all, you need to identify what are the distractions. So you need to find yourself, if it's something that's going on around you, you're going to need to find a study space that is quiet for you. So it might be that you have to find a room in your house, maybe a quiet spot outside. So that's going to be number one, is where are you studying? Is there a space where you can be comfortable and can be quiet? So that's number one. Number two is the things that distract us. And if you're anything like students in Canada, it's the cell phone that distracts us, and it's the video games that distract us. So put those away. Unless you are using them specifically for school, because you need it maybe to use as a calculator, or you need to take a photo of something, try and put them away or turn them off. They all actually do have do not disturb functions on them. So you can take your device and put it on do not disturb, so that you're not going to get carried away and be tempted to look. That does require a little bit of self-control, but I would strongly recommend that you look at the features that you have. And the other thing that I find really helps is to set aside some time. Make an appointment with yourself or a date with yourself. I'm going to study for the next half hour or the next hour, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to get distracted during that time. So again, setting those goals that you're dedicating this time for studying and only studying, so that you can purposely avoid those things. What about dates that are to be learned in history? That's a tricky one, because dates are really hard to remember. So what I would probably think about doing is I would start with what is the important part of the date and why, and then just, come up with some sort of a mnemonic. Maybe the different dates have certain letters that you can start with, and you can sort of learn a pattern of letters and numbers, something like that for the dates. Dates are a little bit tricky. We actually probably shouldn't say this, but in Canada, we don't ask students dates anymore. We really tend to focus more on what was the event and why was it important. So dates are something that we don't have a lot of experience with anymore in Canada, but I would just recommend repetition, coming up with things like that. Okay. Okay, somebody like.
So
Yeah.
Natalie, we can take the other questions in the end of the session, and
Sure.
we'll be the flow. Yeah.
I'm going to actually ask, there's one question here that I'm going to answer. It says, I like to explain to someone while I'm studying. So what type of learner am I? That would mean that you are an auditory learner, because you like to talk with somebody, you like to teach them, you like to explain it out loud to somebody. So that would mean that you are an auditory learner. Okay. Okay, so we're going to come back to some of these a little bit later. They're fantastic questions, so I'm going to look forward to answering those in the Q&A at the end. So let's go back to our poll results. So I'm really happy to see that some people are going to try the note-taking method and try taking notes a little bit differently, or drawing mind and concept maps. I like those too. Those really help me organize my thoughts, and I know my students find them really helpful as well. The mnemonics are fun to do. So I'm glad some of you are going to try coming up with a mnemonic to remember something. I wish I could come back in a week and find out what you've come up with, but I'm sure you're going to come up with some really fun things. Make sure you share them with friends too, because that's a way to help them stick in your head. Okay, color coding your notes and recording yourself. I personally don't like listening to myself talk, so I can understand, but that's a really good, powerful way. If you like to do that, absolutely go ahead, record yourself. Most phones have a voice recorder on it, or it doesn't have to be you. You can find somebody else talking about the topic as well, and that's something that you can do as well. So thank you for that. I appreciate you taking that, and I hope that by telling me that you're going to do this, I'm going to be in the back of your mind, kind of checking up on you, making sure that you're going to stick to that goal and trying that out. Okay, so we're going to actually move to some of the questions people were asking is how do we remember and how am I going to have those things? So we're going to talk a little bit about memory. So basically when we talk about memory, there's sort of three types of memory. that we kind of refer to, but there's two that are really important. The first one that's really important is our short-term or working memory. And it's important to understand that one because that's the one that we sort of engage when we're learning something. It's the one that we initially repeat. So somebody just says something in class, that's the one that's thinking that you're trying to remember it. The challenge with our short-term memory is that we can only hold about 7 things in our brain at the same time. So once we start getting too many things in our brain, and you've all had this when you sit in class and the teacher talks and talks and talks, by the end of it, you don't remember half of it. You only remember a few things. And that's because our brain has to sort of kind of go through the information that we're getting and select the things that we want to remember. And the challenge is that we need to be able to figure out why it's important to be able to put it in our long-term memory. And we need to have it in our long-term memory to be able to remember it for our test. So our goal is to get the things in short-term memory into our long-term memory. And so that's why your teachers make you do a lot of the things they do. They'll sometimes make you write something out. So they tell you, they make you write it down. Because that's one of the ways to start getting it to shift from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. They then give you practice questions, which basically make you repeat all of the information again. And that's because the more you practice it, the more you repeat it, the more you read it and review it, the more likely it's going to end up where we want it, which is in our long-term memory. So our long-term memory is the storage system that holds millions of pieces of data, and it allows us to retrieve it when we need it. And so it includes our visual memory. So those of us that learn visually, we're going to close our eyes and you can see pictures of things, or you can see what you're looking at. The auditory memory, we hear sounds, we remember the words, what it sounds like in our head. And then our motor memory, which is if you're in sports or any activity, by repeating things, our muscles learn how to do things and keep remembering. So ultimately, we want to get things into long-term memory because that's what's going to serve us well on our test. And even when it gets into long-term memory, there are some things that are never going to stick, and they're only going to stick sort of more for a shorter term. So it's not a really short, long. There's a wide range of how long we remember things, but we want to try and remember them as long as possible. Now, the key message here is that if we don't practice an idea, we're going to lose it very, very quickly. So if you don't see the importance, repeat it, don't see it relevant, and you forget it, it could take as quick as 30 seconds to forget something. Okay, so you might say something, and then you can easily forget it. So we really, really need to make sure that we're going to review our notes as soon as you can. So I know when I was a student, I wasn't always the best student, and I would write down my notes, and then I would come home from school and I would want to do something else. I didn't want to look at my notes again. Well, that's not a good strategy if you are a student, because if you do that, you're leaving everything to the last minute and then you tend to forget things. So my recommendation is you want to review your notes as soon as you can. Doesn't mean spend hours and hours and hours, but what it means is that when you come home and you know it's a particularly complicated subject that you're studying and that you have to work hard because it's not sticking in your head from school, is you take 10 or 15 minutes every single day just to review your notes. Maybe copy them out if you want to, add some notes as you remember things, but also to make some questions, because maybe there's something you didn't understand, and then you can go back to your teacher and you can ask for clarification sooner rather than the night before the test when you're panicking. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing your notes on a regular basis, and that doesn't have to take a lot of time. Okay, so we're not talking hours and hours and hours. We're talking just quickly read through them, 10, 15 minutes immediately when you can. And then how else can you do? What else can you do? So remember I said getting up and moving around is a good thing. When you're studying, if you just sit all day, you're going to get very, very sleepy. And I saw somebody had asked about how do I get sleepy and stay awake when I'm studying? Well, you got to keep the oxygen moving. You got to keep yourself active. So get up, move around. If you start to find that you're nodding off, go for a quick walk around the block, maybe go for a jog on the spot, do a few push-ups, do something that's going to get you moving and snap you out of that sleepy spell. The other thing that I noticed about falling asleep is don't have a huge meal before you're about to study. Have healthy, small snacks that you're going to if you're hungry. But if you're trying to study after a really big dinner, you're probably going to try and fall asleep. So try and avoid doing that right after that really, really good dinner that you've had. But, you know, get up, move around. If you have to have the big dinner, maybe go for a quick walk, get your blood moving again, and then sit down and exercise. Otherwise, you will try and fall asleep. Say things out loud, talk, okay? That helps you remember. We know that that's important. So talk to whoever it might be. You can talk to a friend, and that goes down with the teaching too. You can talk to a brother, a sister, an auntie, an uncle, a friend, a grandparent. Even if you have a pet, talk to them. They like attention. So if you need to say it out loud and it's easier to say it to somebody, find somebody. A stuffed animal, just find somebody. You can find, it doesn't have to be necessarily somebody who talks back to you, okay? Practice your questions. When your teachers assign those practice questions, they do it for a reason. They do it because they know that for some concepts, you just need to do it over and over and over again. And the more that you practice it, the more that you'll become better at it. But when you're doing it, don't just go through the motions of following the steps. Really think it through. Make sure, talk to yourself. I'm doing this because the next step is this, and I have to do it because, and I'm looking for this. And talk yourself through that problem. Don't just go through the motions, because I know a lot of students will just look at the example and then they just copy it. And that is not very helpful, because you're not actually understanding anymore. You're just kind of following through the steps and doing it like a robot. You want to actually understand why you're doing each step. So the first thing might be, I'm looking for the values that I need in my question. And so you write that down. Okay, I need to know what I'm missing. You write that down. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. So this is the equation that I'm going to be using. So talk yourself through that step, especially if you're struggling in terms of remembering it. Okay, so some people, it comes much more easily to, but some people it's challenging. So make sure you talk yourself through when you practice. Don't just try and repeat it without thinking about what you're doing. Making connections. Making connections is really, really important. You need to know why you are learning something. If you know why it's important or how it connects to the bigger picture, you are more likely to remember it. So if you're talking about dates, if you know why that date is significant and why, you know, that particular, let's say, battle or that particular agreement is really, really important in history, then the date is going to be a lot easier to remember, because that becomes significant. It becomes something important that you really need to understand. Okay, watch, listen, look for other resources. If your notes aren't working, your textbook isn't working, we today have the benefit of having the internet and so many other resources out there that we can look for. So take advantage of that. But the caveat is, you're only watching the thing that's related to your studying. Don't get distracted and go down the rabbit hole of watching all those other videos that pop up, because that's going to be problematic. So again, be very focused. If you need to watch a video, absolutely. If you need somebody else to explain it to you one more time, best way to do it is to go online and see what you can find. But if you can't find something in 5 minutes, then you go back to your notes and you look for something else. Like, set yourself a limit as to how long you're going to spend watching or looking for something online, because that can get you very distracted as well. Create flashcards to quiz yourself. Use the Cornell notes to quiz yourself. Build a model, draw diagrams. All of those things are going to be really, really helpful. This one is my favorite one, taking a break. Okay, often we think we have to sit down and study, and we sit and we want to study because we've got so much to do. The best thing that you can do is take a break. Our brains need to have a little bit of a break to absorb new information. So if you're studying and you want to study for an hour, take a break. My preference is taking a break 5 minutes every half hour. Every 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. Get up, walk around, stretch your legs, have a glass of water, have maybe a healthy snack if you're a little bit hungry. Do something, talk to somebody, just take your mind off of it. During that break, your brain is still working. The other thing that you can do too is, when you're studying, if you're feeling sleepy, It doesn't hurt to close your eyes for 5-10 minutes. Make sure you set an alarm because you don't want to sleep through the rest of the evening, but set yourself an alarm, give yourself a little bit of a short nap. And when you're sleeping, believe it or not, your brain is actually sometimes reviewing the things that you've just studied. And so when you wake up, you feel a little bit refreshed and you'll actually be ready to study again. And the things you studied before the break will hopefully be stuck better in your brain. So lots of different things, ways you can take a break. And that sort of leads us into the do something else. Sleep, meditate, play a sport, do something you love, dance, sing. Take a, studying doesn't have to be miserable all the time. Reward yourself. If you've studied for 50 minutes, take 10 minutes and do something that you really love to do. And then make sure you go back to your studying. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck doing everything that you like to do and we don't get back to study. But if you reward yourself, even on those really long days when you need to study, you'll feel much better. You'll be in a much better mental state. And then the last one is, if you are an auditory learner where you like, have quiet music playing in the background, because sometimes that helps you focus. It'll help get rid of some of the background noise and the distractions. But please don't choose your favorite rock songs. Choose quiet music, classical music, something with no lyrics, something that's kind of just there, almost like a white noise, but that's not going to totally distract you, where you start singing and actually not focusing on the work. So those are some of the key things that are really going to help you improve your memory. A lot of it, as you can see, is really just about being in the right frame of mind, making sure that you're well rested, making sure that you've eaten properly. Those are, I didn't put those on there, but those are automatics, okay? Every time you study, you want to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, that you're getting enough food, and that you're going to be the best person that you can be when you are going to study. Okay. Just going to check the time there. Okay, so some other tools then. We've talked a lot about these, the mnemonics that can help with memory. Okay, games, there's lots of review games and practice out there, songs, visualizing, models, making notes, color coding, retrieval practice. This is your practice questions, actually using the information that you need, and those are all the really important things. Okay, so moving on, study tips. So we've talked about making a schedule. Use your phone agenda calendar to plan out when you're going to study for a class. This helps you. This also helps avoid distractions. Let your family know, I'm studying between 7 and 8 p.m. tonight. Please don't disturb me. Okay, pick a time that's going to work for the family. If you know that something's really noisy at a certain time, don't study then, find another time. Okay, so make a schedule, stick to it, book your time. Otherwise, it's always easy to put it off. Find a study space that's quiet, free of distraction, comfortable. You want to be comfortable when you study. Otherwise, you're not going to stick at it. You're going to leave and you're going to get distracted very easily. Don't cram. Take breaks. Don't leave it to the last night. Start early. A little bit every single day from the time that you learn something is very, very helpful. Take an effective break. We talked about this, about taking good breaks, getting up and moving around, doing something a little bit different. Practice and review early. I can't stress that enough. Please don't leave it to the night before. You're never, ever going to be able to cram all that information into your brain. And even if you do, the minute that you write the test, it's going to all disappear again. And then the next time that you use it, you're going to have to start back from scratch. So you want to make sure that you start and review early. Use your flashcards, concept maps, group ideas. Excellent strategy for studying to help quiz yourself. If you're quizzing yourself, if you want to do that, you can make them online, or you can just grab pieces of paper, cut them up, sticky notes, and use them. Put the question on one side, the answer on the other, or even just quiz each other with friends. That works too. Group your ideas and organize yourself. Use the mind maps and the concept maps to help make a story. That's one of the ways of remembering, is sort of, telling the story of something, and that would help also with remembering those dates as well. Use visuals, pictures, graphs, word clouds, mind maps. It doesn't all have to be words. So whatever helps you remember, it's okay to use. Okay, practice questions, obviously. When you're doing the practice questions though, the most important one in my mind is the why is this important? Why do I need to know this? Why is this relevant to everything that I'm studying? Because if I know why it's relevant, I'm going to remember it a lot easier than if I'm just memorizing pieces of information and don't really understand how they connect. So the more you understand how things connect, the easier it is going to be to remember things. And especially if you're an auditory learner, consider studying with friends. Doesn't mean study with friends all the time, but there's nothing wrong with getting together with a friend and explaining your ideas to each other, talking them out, quizzing each other, and helping each other prepare. Everybody is studying independently, but studying and what you're learning is not really a competition for yourself. You need to do what works for you. So if studying with a friend is really helpful, then do it. And but be respectful of the fact that you can't do all your studying with friends, but it does help to have somebody that you can talk ideas to, or you can clarify questions with, because then that's going to help you better understand the material and then remember it. So it's your turn. So we're almost at the end. So you're going to choose 2 study tips that you are going to try and implement. So are you going to plan to study? So you're going to make a schedule and you're going to set some goals around what you want to do and what needs to be done. So it might be today I'm going to finish the unit on X. Are you going to take short breaks? Are you going to use flashcards? Are you going to start early and review a little every day? This is my favorite one, by the way. And you're going to practice, practice, practice. So I'd like you to choose 2 that you are going to try and implement as you come up to your in the next week, or as you start with the next unit, or whatever you're working on in school. And while we're doing that, I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A. Okay, so somebody said, during note-taking after reading from the textbook, I try marking important things, so that's awesome. But the problem is that I underline or highlight most of the entire paragraph or the entire page. So really, in the end, it's not very helpful. So yes, there is a technique to do that. So you can, that is the challenge. So it's really about identifying maybe the keywords or identifying what the purpose is. So if you're reading a textbook, what I would strongly recommend that you is the keyword, and then highlight only the keywords. So try to avoid highlighting all of the sort of the examples, the explanations, the things like that. Really just be very conscious of what it is that you want to highlight in the in your text. Remember that that's where sort of sometimes the Cornell notes is really helpful, because it gets you to think about what is important. Okay, so I see the poll results have come up. So yeah, so we'll get to those in a second. So with the highlighting, really focus on highlighting the keywords and maybe the definitions. Or if there's an example that you're trying to remember, maybe highlight the example. Try and avoid highlighting entire sentences. So look for the keywords that are going to stick in your head. And the other thing is sometimes maybe using different colors. If you're finding that you're using, because some texts really have eliminated all of the unnecessary stuff. So maybe different colors to help you color code, so that at least you're giving the color coding piece a way of differentiating. But that is a tricky trap, and a lot of students end up highlighting way more than they should. So it's just practice and going back and saying, was this really something that I needed to highlight? Okay, so we've got some people that are going to plan to study. Excellent. And whoops, can we get those results back up one more time? Because I think they timed out. I don't on my end. There we go. Thank you. Short breaks, flashcards, starting early, and practice. So I hope that you will try these things. So the schedule, very, very important. Okay. Taking some breaks. Absolutely do that. You'll feel so much better and so much more energized, and that will hopefully deal with some of the sleepiness that some of you are feeling. Okay. And starting early, reviewing a little a day, again, really important. Don't leave it to the last minute, because then there's no way that you're ever going to be able to get everything into that brain of yours. Okay. So I think just in the order of time, we're going to take some questions now, because that leads us to the last thing. So here's just a couple of other things before we take the questions. Don't worry about making mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. It's part of that growth mindset. So as you're practicing, if you're making mistakes, just say, okay, I don't have it yet, and identify it as an area that you need to keep working on it. Regular homework and study time, we've talked about the importance. Find something that works for you. That is the takeaway from this one. It has to work for you. Just because your friend makes copious amounts of notes and highlights everything, for you, that might not work. And that's okay. It doesn't have to work. Okay? Organizing your work, using a variety of different methods, making learning fun, relax. At the end of the day, if you're doing all of the things that you need to do, if you are in a good place, you will be successful, and you just need to take a deep breath. So with that, we're going to get to some questions. Is that okay?
Perfect.
I think 2 or 3 questions maximum, because we have to go on to the panel discussion after this. I'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any in particular? Some of them have already been answered. So I'm just going to quickly go through. So somebody asked, is printing handouts and studying them from while walking a good way to learn? If you like to move while you're learning, then absolutely. If that works for you, go ahead and try it. Remember, sometimes studying, you have to try things to see if it works for you. So if what you're doing right now isn't working, I would suggest trying something different. I think that's basically the time. Okay. Somebody said, how can we study for longer periods of time? Start early. We know that studying for hours and hours and hours on end is not effective. So you need to plan to study a small amount every day, an hour every day, 2 hours every day. If you've got a big exam coming up, maybe a little bit more. But if you say, okay, I'm going to study for 6 hours at a time, that is never going to be effective. We tend to fall into that category, but if you're leaving that as your main one, please don't, because it won't be very effective. The one thing, I'm just looking, so there's lots of fantastic questions here. I think the one thing I'm just going to talk on, a couple of people have said, how can we develop self-confidence, or how will I feel like, how will I overcome the fear of not being prepared? And I think that's a really important one. That goes back to that growth mindset. We can't be perfect all the time, but we know that we can improve. And so we're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days. And some days you're going to feel the most prepared and you're going to go into a test and it's not going to go well. And we don't know why. It just doesn't go well. And there's other days where you're not feeling as good and you're going to go in and you're going to nail it and you're going to be really happy. The only thing that you have control over, okay, is how you prepare. So you need to do everything that you can do, and you can't worry about what's going to happen on the day of. You need to make sure that you've studied. You need to make sure that you feel prepared, that you've gone over everything, that you've done everything you can possibly do to be successful. And you need to go into that exam or that test knowing that you've done everything that you can do to be successful. And if you have done that, you're more than likely going to be successful. If you start worrying about it, then that's when we start having issues where you start to second guess yourself on a test or you start to have problems. So be confident. Know that if you're preparing well, you're going to be successful. And know that you can only control those things which are within your control, which is how you prepare for that test. You can't control what questions you're going to get, but you can control how much information you know and how you're going to prepare. So with that, I think we'll stop there. I hope there's something here that you can take away. I wish you all the best with your studies as you go forward. I know that you're all going to be successful, and I wish you the best for the rest of the school year.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It is fantastic. Whatever you have said in the past 1 hour, I think the points that I have taken down notes of every point that you have given using the Cornell method. So I've gone into absolutely taking notes, finding out, what are the important points of the notes and trying to record what you've said, reduce it to concepts that you said, and reflecting and reviewing. I think there's a very important part that you said. So my biggest thanks on behalf of all the participants and all the attendees out here. Thank you so much for taking this workshop. I would also like to quickly right now, before we move on to the panel discussion, I would like to thank the following schools for participating: APL Global School Chennai, Pathways World School Aravali, Pathways Gurgaon, Modern School Vasant Vihar, Alcon Public School, Maharani Gayatri Devi Girls School Jaipur, Scottish High International School Gurgaon, and 17 other participants from other schools. Thank you for joining in. I would also like to take this opportunity to quickly thank Mr. Ralon Nazareth, Senior Manager, Global Education Partnerships, Rochdale Academy, Ms. Mridul Singh Jhala, Member Designate to the Board of Directors at Confederation of Educational Institutions of India, Mr. Kartik Narayan, Executive Director, CII, and Ms. Meenakshi Sani, Principal, Modern School, Vasant Vihar. Thank you so much for supporting this workshop. Now, I would like to quickly invite two of our most important guests and our trainer in this session to our next 10 to 15 minute session, which is a panel discussion. I'm Dr. Sandeep. I am the Group Chief Executive Officer of SGS Group, which is Bangladesh's largest private sector healthcare and education service provider. We run Evercare hospitals, Apollo hospitals. We run DPS, SGS schools, ISG. So we have a plethora of businesses. We have, as you all know, Ms. Natalie Rudner. She's the Director of Academics at Rochdale Academy. I would take this opportunity to warmly welcome Ms. Geeta Jagannathan, Founder, Managing Director at APL Global School, Chennai. It is fantastic that you are able to join us, Ms. Geeta. Karthik, if you are able to add the spotlight, I would be grateful. And Ms. Sonia Gandhi Mehta, School Director, Pathways World School, Aravali. Thank you for joining us for this session of the workshop. Your inputs would be most valued by all the participants out here. So the structure out here would be, I would quickly move on to first Ms. Geeta, then Ms. Sonia, and get your comments on the topic. And finally, I'll move on to Ms. Natalie to summarize whatever lessons that we have learned in this session, and hope that the participants out here are able to take back something which transforms their life. So I'll move on to you, Ms. Geeta Jagannathan. You have years and decades of experience, varied experience. You've gone through personal challenges. You've overcome those personal challenges. And, the story of your successes is something that people learn from. So when we say level up, how to, the basic concept was level up, achieve your full potential in school. Now, many of the lessons we learn in life are what come from our lessons in school that develops our personality, our character. In this workshop, Natalie talked about significantly memory skills, but she also talked about reaching out to the community, to friends, finding out what works and having a structure. She talked about various structures. In your experience, children, will they be able to internalize such structures? How would you suggest, after hearing this workshop, how would you suggest a child who's in school, maybe middle school, maybe senior, maybe junior school, how should he go about achieving his or her full potential in school? What would be your views, Ms. Geeta? You're on mute, Ms. Geeta. I would request you to unmute yourself. Host, if you can.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. I don't feel well qualified to comment much on study skills because I wasn't myself a very committed student academically. I relied mostly on class participation, so I guess that makes me an auditory learner.
Right.
But from all that Ms. Radner has said, I think there's a lot that the children can take away and implement. Yeah. There was one question that interested me in the question answer box from an APL student, Aldrich, which says, how can I commit to studying? How can I commit to being? Now, I think that's a key question, because if you cannot commit to your studies, then all of these strategies are going to go waste. You're not going to be able to implement any of that. To answer that question, I feel you have to look at what you mean by success. What do you mean by potential?
Right.
What does success mean to you personally? What are your core values? Look at what are your core values. Why do you want to do the studies that you're doing? What are you hoping it will lead you to? And if you can focus on that end goal, that end result that you want, then you'll find the commitment to go with whatever process is required for you to study.
Excellent. Yes. Yes, Ms. Geeta.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, I just feel that realizing potential is more about first identifying what it is that you want to achieve. And that's going to be different for each person. When we talk about unique potential, it does mean unique, because each one of us has a personal value that we want to work towards. Identifying that value, introspection is what is called for. You know, there's in the Yoga Sutra, there's the term swadhyaya, which swa is self, adhyaya is learning. So learning about oneself is what is going to lead to your being able to commit it to your learning about academic subjects. And Natalie also kept emphasizing on the why. If you find the why of why you're learning a concept, where do you think it's going to be applicable? What other concepts does it connect to? When you find that entire web of knowledge, then you're going to be able to find the excitement of learning, rekindle the curiosity that you had as a very young child. No?
Right. Thank that. Very, very true. I'll take this opportunity to thank Ms. Natalie again. She has to move on to the next meeting. Natalie, thank you for joining us once again, and thanks for answering all the questions on the chat. This is very, very helpful to the students. I understand that all the participants will be sending us more questions in the meanwhile. We will send them to you for your personal review. Natalie, on behalf of Confederation of Educational Institutions of India and the other participants, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and good luck to all the students and good luck to all the teachers. And I'd be happy to, if questions come my way, please send them along and I'll happy to send some answers back.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Same to you, Natalie. Moving ahead, Ms. Sonia Mehta, what Ms. Geeta right now talked about, realizing one's the focus of one's potential. And this is a very important part of the development of one's future also, from the part where a student has to choose subjects to the part where he or she has to choose a life or a career. How would you suggest that a student who's studying in school, he wants to achieve his full potential, but where should that potential be focused? How would a student get to know? He's young, he doesn't know how to understand where his potential lies. Is it dramatics? Is it engineering? Is he slated to become a neuroscientist? How would you advise a student to make that choice to achieve a full potential?
Well, in this day and age where we have a myriad of different careers that now students can pick from, this task has become so much more difficult for them. Because when we were young, there were just about a handful of professions that were considered respectable, whereas now that has multiplied exponentially. So it is very important, as Mrs. Geeta had said, that you have to understand yourself and you have to know where your strengths lie. Another very important part of this entire decision-making process is really the role of the parent and how parents influence children to fulfill their dreams rather than look at letting them fly on their own. So very often you find that if parents are doctors, they normally pressurize their children to be doctors, which is not the right thing to do, because the child might not really be interested in sciences and might want to go into films or, be an actor for all you know.
Absolutely.
So we really, as the sort of now the older generation, we really need to allow our children to find their space and find their abilities and where they will be able to flourish.
Right.
I also think that to really reach your own potential, it's very important also not to compare yourself to others. Again, that's also something that a lot of parents do. My neighbor's son has got 98%. Why haven't you got 98%? So compete with yourself, challenge yourself rather than trying to compete with others is something, again, that I feel really allows children to reach their potential. And, you know, academics is not a standalone area. Sports influences it, music influences academics. So if a child is not doing very well in academics, the normal tendency is for parents to stop them from going out to play, stop them from going to do co-curricular activities. And for all you know, that particular child may flourish in these areas. And once they do well in one area, when they build that self-confidence, it automatically seeps into other areas as well.
Right.
So it is very important for us to remember that just because we want children to do well in academics, we should not have a tunnel vision and only focus on academics alone.
Right.
And the last thing that I feel is also very important, especially in today's day and age where knowledge is available at our fingertips, on our smartphones, on computer. As they say, Google Baba is everywhere. So we really don't need to be filling our students with knowledge. We need to be focusing as educators more on skills, because that is what is going to help them flourish in the future. Because for all you know, what we are teaching them in school today might be completely outdated by the time they get into the workforce. So then
Right.
how are we preparing them to learn, to sort of unlearn and relearn things? So focus on skills, I feel, is also something that as educational institutions, educators, we also need to focus on.
Excellent.
Yeah.
These points are absolutely appropriate. Being cognizant of time, I'll move on to my last question to Ms. Geeta. This point about comparing with others and focusing so much on academics, many a time leads children to consider themselves failing on some fronts. So one point is when they think that they have failed, maybe they really have not failed. But at the same time, how would you suggest to a student who is faced with the dilemma that he has failed or he has not succeeded to the extent that he believed he could have succeeded? How would you advise a student to face this kind of a situation where he did not get 97%? He did not get, what subject he wanted. He did not get into the college he wanted. How would you advise a student to face such a challenge, such a failure kind of a situation?
See, at that point, what you need to do is to examine why that 97% mattered to you. And quite often, as Ms. Sonia pointed out, it might be just a point of comparison. It's peer pressure, it's parental pressure, which is again peer pressure at the parental level. So going back to looking at yourself and what is it that you want to achieve and why do you want to achieve that? So if you can unpack your feelings around getting that lower mark, that will help a lot in setting yourself a realistic goal for the next step and working towards it. Accepting failure is not easy. I've faced it myself and I know how crushing it was. And it took me a while to accept that, okay, that's where the growth mindset comes in again. That
Right.
you're able to tell yourself this has happened today for a reason.
Right.
And then you evaluate what are those reasons? What did I do that didn't meet the level I wanted to reach? And how can I do it better next time? Or it might even be that I was setting myself the wrong goal in the first place. There's a personal story attached to this. You know, my sister was determined to get into IIT because she wanted to go against that myth that was there earlier in our generation, that women don't do well in the sciences.
Right.
And a woman engineer doesn't happen. And my father was an engineer, and she very much wanted to impress him as being the girl who got into engineering and did well. She didn't get in, of course, but it took her a couple of years to realize that she was really good at the arts. She was very creative. And once she realized that, she really began to fly. She finally did her PhD in theater and was a Fulbright scholar in theater, but it took her years of feeling like a failure and working through it to come to this. So sometimes maybe the goal you're looking at itself is wrong. It's the goal has been set by comparison again. Comparison is really the bane of our existence. So if we can just learn to connect deeply with ourselves, what are our values? What do we really want out of life? If relationships matter a lot to me, then I should be working towards something that improves my relationships. If being successful in the corporate world is what matters to me, that is what I should be working towards. So look at yourself, not at your neighbor or your friend. Your friend may actually want something very different from you. Just because you're friends, it doesn't mean you want the same thing. I think that's my answer.
Absolutely. Right. No,
If I could just add to what Geeta has also said, is if we look at failure, we should look at failure in a way that I've learned one more way which doesn't work. So it's not really failure, but you've learned that you have to do it in another way the next time.
Yeah, like they say, failure doesn't exist. It's all only feedback.
Yeah. Otherwise, Edison wouldn't have been able to invent the light bulb if he sort of gave up after the first few times he failed.
And absolutely, absolutely. What the examples are many of people who've been considered failures who've come back and college before I went to IIMs and then achieved much more in life. But you're absolutely right. The focus was wrong, and when the focus became right, I also understood how to achieve more in life. You're absolutely right. So I will quickly summarize today's session. Today's session by Ms. Natalie Rudner was about leveling up, how to achieve your full potential in school. A significant part of the workshop focused on improving your memory skills, improving learning capability, using various strategies which have been tried and tested and variously used by students across the globe. And these are strategies all these points which would help them at least learn better inside the classroom. The session was not just about learning, of course, but a significant part of the session was on learning. We moved on to the panel discussion where I think the most important points that Ms. Geeta and Ms. Sonia have brought in is number one is know the focus that you want, achieving full potential, but in which area. It's important that we do not go ahead with just what parents want, or rather parents should realize that we should allow children to find their own space. It's a very important point that we should not go ahead comparing children to others. Of course, parents or I or anyone, want to compare. It's also a tough thing to stop comparing, but it's a good lesson. And one important point you brought out was academics is not a standalone area. It is a combination of different areas, and it should not just be marks. It should be overall full development of a personality. And like Ms. Mehta said, knowledge is available everywhere. It is more important to achieve your full potential, perhaps in skills. If in the future you're looking at just gaining knowledge, that will be available almost free. It's there on the internet, but skills are not available free. And that is something which is a differentiator that you can have. And last but not the least is the fact that who has defined your goal? Is it the goal that you want to just prove a point to others, or that really is something that you're passionate about? And these points are absolutely important for children. My panelists, Ms. Geeta, Ms. Sonia, thank you for joining us and giving these valuable thoughts over the course of 15 minutes. Very, very perfect session that we had. Once again, I thank the Confederation of Institutions of India for hosting such a quick, nice session. I thank all the participants, all the schools for joining. I thank Rochdale Academy also. And with these words, I call this session to a close. Thank you so much. We meet you soon in the next session. Mr. Karthik, when is the next session?
It's on 8th October.
8th October. We'll be sending you the information with respect to the 8th October session. That's a much wide session. I hope you all are able to participate there too. Thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms.
Thank
Geeta.
you.
Thank you so much, Ms.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.